All right, it's 12 o'clock sharp. Let's get going with episode 2 of the webinar. My name is Sean Scallon. I'm Operations Director at the Victorian Bioenergy Network. Welcome to episode 2 of our Biomass to Biomethane webinar series, and it's the opportunity for industry this time. We heard about the opportunity for agriculture and farming last time, so we're moving on to industry. And we're going to explore those applications that can't easily be electrified. And so a short paragraph about the VBN before we get going. So the VBN is building the bioenergy ecosystem in Victoria. We are bioenergy policy advocates, and we have also run 10 events in the last 2 years, which is quite an achievement, as anyone who runs events knows. 8 of those were in regional Victoria, and that's one of our key focuses. That's where the biomass is, that's where the projects will be. And so we've had 2 in CBD Melbourne, engaging in the policy debate with Victorian government in those mainly. The last event in November 2025 was held in Wodonga. We had 120 participants, and we received some great coverage on media, radio, ABC Radio and WIN News. And then we got some fantastic feedback from the attendees. It was a really good event, and we had a great site visits the next day, which were also very well attended. So we'll talk about the next event shortly. So on to today. Today we'll hear from 3 speakers who are well qualified to present the opportunity that biomethane presents to industry to help decarbonise hard to electrify processes. Susie Jakobovich from Gemma is on the line. Hi, Susie. Harris Motasa from Ulster Uniforms is also there, and Jared Irving is also joining us, as well as our 3 speakers. We have provided bios in the Zoom event page and via LinkedIn for our speakers, so we're not going to repeat that in the interest of just getting into the material. Our moderator for today is a well-known figure in the renewable gas space, Susie Jakobovich, and she is General Manager of Renewable Gas at Gemina. So I will add Susie and hand over to you, who will set some context and the order of proceedings for today. So over to you, Susie, and I'll pin you to the screen and I will depart and see you at the end. Okay.
Thanks, Sean.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. As Sean said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Susie Jakobovits. I'm the General Manager of Renewable Gas at Gemina. Gemina is an energy infrastructure business. So we move electrons and molecules sort of from supply points to demand centres right across the country. We own both gas and electricity assets, which puts us in a really unique position of really understanding and seeing across the entire energy transition and seeing what it's going to take to achieve Australia's net zero ambitions. So, we are on a pathway to net zero, and until recently, it was believed that we could achieve this by electrification of all energy uses. But in more recent times, we've started to hear from businesses that, they can't viably electrify. They still need to find a pathway to net zero, but electrification is not an option for them. These businesses have been dubbed hard to abate. They include a lot of, industrial manufacturing businesses with really high heat processes of, 1,000 degrees that require, a combustible heat to achieve, that really high heat. And this includes industries like steel and cement, glass, ceramics, a lot of the construction materials. We also hear that there are businesses that need a gaseous molecule as feedstock in their products, like chemicals, medicines, plastics, fertilizer. So I think that's really well recognised and acknowledged right across the sector and across all levels of government, that these hard to abate sectors require ongoing gas use, but also need to be able to decarbonise it. But at Gemina, as we get out and talk to more and more businesses, we're hearing that there are lots of other businesses that are, finding electrification really difficult to achieve, a lot more so than previously thought. So today, that's what today's conversation is about. We're going to talk to a commercial business to understand what are the limitations and also the opportunities that they see for decarbonising their business. And we're going to speak to a biomethane producer to understand the potential for biomethane to play a viable decarbonisation solution at scale for businesses. And then we'll bring both parties together to discuss what is it we need to do collaboratively to move this market forward. So I'd like to start by introducing Harris Mataza. Harris is the Energy and Utility Manager at Alsco. So welcome, Harris.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. Let's start off with how about you introduce yourself and Alsco and tell us a little bit about what Alsco does.
No, definitely. So, Harris Murtaza, Energy and Utilities Manager at Alsco Uniforms. We're a commercial laundry primarily, but we provide textile rental solutions to all industries, from coffee shops, food and beverage, all the way up to your big supermarkets, the mines, every industry from uniforms, textiles, linen, accommodation linen. And it's a full service. So we rent it out, deliver it, and then pick it up, wash it in our commercial laundry, dry it, iron it, and then deliver it again. So it's the circular solution. And we've got 13 sites across Australia, 8 sites in New Zealand, and 3 sites in Asia. The regional head office for Asia Pac is in Sydney. That's where I work out of. But we've got sites in every state, basically serving over 40,000 customers.
Wow, sounds like you provide a very valuable service to a lot of different industries. So thank you very much for that. How is gas consumed in your business? What is it that you use gas for?
Yeah, so primarily we use about 300,000 gigajoules of gas a year across those 13 facilities that I mentioned. And primarily they're used as a fuel source, the primary fuel source within a boiler. And that boiler therefore generates steam to be used for hot water generation, primarily for the washing, direct steam injection, and especially in our continuous batch washers, because you've got the initial rinse at about 25 degrees. And after that, rather than chucking all that water away, we would deicide, direct steam inject it to get that up to temperature for thermal disinfection. What we also use the steam for is, in some processes, we've got steam dryers. So those are run on steam, and some of our dryers have their own burners, so they also consume gas. There's a mixture of gas dryers and steam dryers within the business. And then we've got ironing. Ironing is primarily done through steam, which the chests open at 180 degrees Celsius, and all the product goes through the ironers. So the gas is used in the boilers generate the steam is therefore used as an energy source within our processing facilities.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like you're getting up to those temperatures of 1,000 degrees. So I think the assumption is made that your business can very easily electrify. Can you tell us a little bit about your decarbonisation journey so far? Let's start by what's driving your desire to decarbonise. Where's that coming from?
Yeah, so Alsco is committed to better outcomes for the environment, for the communities that we operate in, and it's a massive value that we hold dear. So we initially set targets to reduce our consumption because we believe using less resources is better for everyone. Using less water, using less gas. What it also gives us is some certainty in terms of the pricing of utilities has been quite volatile over the last few years. We can't control the price that's locked in or whatever the spot market is doing. However, what we can control is our usage of those utilities, and therefore reducing it is better for the business, but better for the planet and better outcomes overall. So initially we set targets to reduce our gas, electricity and water consumption, as well as our emissions by 20% to our baseline. That was 2019. We achieved that last year, and we therefore then committed to science-based targets and aligning our carbon emissions reductions journey with science-based targets, which are near-term targets out until 2035, just so that we can continue to monitor those. So in line with that, we've done energy audits across all our facilities. We've got a massive boiler upgrade program currently going on, where we've got European boilers coming in at 5 of our facilities. We've done a rollout of 10 solar projects, about 2 megawatts worth of solar has been installed. We've done steam traps, power factor units, all the findings from the energy audits are being implemented and worked through, and we're getting some really great results. In terms of electrification that you mentioned, so what we found is some of our sites, the first hurdle for electrification is the infrastructure constraint. So some of our sites share transformers or share the electrical capacity with other, we're in industrial estates or in industrial parks, or even in mixed zones where the transformer and that capacity is shared. And therefore, we get really nervous even putting on an electric vehicle or one piece of equipment. Putting on an electric boiler is a whole new kettle of fish. So there's a lot of costs associated with electrical infrastructure upgrades. Who that cost sits with, that needs to be part of the capex in consideration. We did an upgrade of a transformer at one of our facilities, and it was close to $1 million in capex. So then you're already $1 million behind in infrastructure cost before you even start talking about the asset replacement. But the sites that do have electrical capacity, like one of the trials that we're doing in Alexandria, we've realized that we can substitute our hot water generation. So our hot water through the DSI, through the steam boiler, gets our water to about 60, 65 degrees. And we've realized that doing some wastewater heat recovery and running that through a heat pump actually gives us a very good ROI for electrification and hot water generation. So that's our primary focus right now in doing heat pumps, high temperature heat pumps across the business. But for the other two things I mentioned, the drying and the ironing, there's just no equipment out there that is electric. And to get up to those temperatures, just the size of those, our dryers are 200 kgs, and just the sizing of those, there's no electric dryers or electric ironers. And for the ironing lines, you need about 200 degrees for the chest to even open. And just getting up to those temperatures is really difficult right now. So in the first instance, we're finding that doing the hot water and electrifying our hot water through heat pumps is the easier or first cab off the rank, especially if there's infrastructure. But the other things are just too hard for us right now.
So in terms of biomethane, do you think biomethane would provide a viable solution for you for the dryer and the ironing?
Yeah, so it's a drop-in fuel in terms of for our boiler. So primarily what we want to do is just focus on our boiler as the primary source. And I'll give you an example. So in the South Island of New Zealand, where we've got 4 sites, those sites don't have any reticulated gas. They used to all run on solid fuel coal previously, and now they run on biomass. But what we did was those sites, all the dryers, ironers, everything was on steam. And there was one energy source, the primary energy source, which was the boiler. So when we had to transition, we just changed out the fuel source, and we were able to transition quite easily because everything else was able to take advantage of that steam that was now being generated through a renewable source. That's what we're going towards, where if we've got one primary source, which is the boiler, and now we're investing into boilers that are multi-fuel ready, so hydrogen, biomethane, biogas ready from Europe. And if we're going for one energy source, then you just do a fuel transition, and then you can decarb your entire site rather than having to change burners on everything.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that electrification is quite an expensive approach for you. There's also, partially driven by those capacity constraints. And so, yeah, that fuel switching, but for a like-for-like fuel, a drop-in fuel really is a great solution for you. It sounds like you're making a lot of investments at the moment. Are all your assets across all your sites sort of at the end of asset life? Or is this forcing you to make investments where you're not ready to?
No, it's a mixture of all. So as I said, 13 sites, about 5 of them were end of life for the boilers. And therefore, we decided, look, we're investing into an asset for 25 years. How do we ensure that the fuel that we're selecting is the best case? So there were 2 considerations there. Number one was if we were to go electric boilers, and we did a lot of studies on this, and we had government-funded studies. In certain times, there's control demand charges, where if there's a lot of demand on the grid, you get penalized for that. And a lot of sites that were implementing electric boilers had backup diesel generators ready on standby to go. And for us, it was like, do we want to really maintain 2 assets and have all the maintenance servicing for that? And the second consideration was, look, we're buying an asset for 25 years. in the medium term, let's say the next 5 years, we've got actually gas locked in at reasonably good rates. So at least we have control of our destiny over the next 5 years for gas. But after that, if there's any blending into the grid, we will invest extra into burners that are multi-fuel ready. So we spent 100,000 extra on upgrading burners that were ready for hydrogen or biogas, biomethane, for drop as to use as a drop-in fuel. So those burners are ready to go. They just need tuning. So we spent that extra just to future-proof and de-risk the business.
Excellent. So what are you seeing in terms of your, I guess, credible transition plan to net zero? What do you see the ultimate end picture being for Alsco, and what will that look like?
Yeah, what that will look like is for us, of course, initially with the electrification, that's all the heat pumps to electrify all our hot water demand, and also using a lot of that solar, because we're a 5 day a week operation and we're done by about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Sometimes there's excess solar. So trying to capture that, store that through thermal storage and using that to generate hot water the following day. So that will take care of that. And what we see the decarbonization journey is to be able to have renewable gas available for our boilers in the medium to long term, so that these assets that we've just bought in 2025, 2026, we anticipate they will be still running in 2045, 2050, and we do not want to be having an asset that cannot run because the fuel isn't available anymore. So having access to renewable gas would be the primary focus, but also looking at energy storage opportunities, the cheaper electricity during the day. How do we manage that? Because we've got a very good load profile for that as well.
Excellent. So it sounds like it's a real diversified approach to how you're going to manage your emission reduction.
Definitely, you have to in this day and age. I feel like there could be a lot of different variables, right? So of course you've got the variables in terms of utilities cost, gas and electricity pricing. But right now you've also seen there's a lot of negative pricing going on in the NEM. But if there's any government intervention or the talk of 3 hours free or whatever happens, that could change everything. So I think to de-risk the business, it's really important to go with solar, go look at biogas, look at all your opportunities and options, because there's no silver bullet to this, Susie. That's what we realized. Like we're not as fortunate where in the South Island of New Zealand, just having one energy source, getting rid of coal, biomass, fully decarbed. I don't think we have the same luxuries here.
Kind of brings me to one of my final questions is, what would your advice be to other organisations that are working through what their climate transition plan looks like? I think you've partially just answered it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think diversify, but also start with energy efficiency. Like if we looked at, we took part in the New South Wales Net Zero Planning grant, and we had a presentation done to the senior leadership yesterday. And we saw the business as usual, what we're doing with the energy efficiency, energy audits, trying to reduce what we're using. We were already ahead. Our BAU right now was ahead of our near-term SBTI targets. So that put us in a really good position where they say now you're actually waiting for policy, for fuel availability, for other levers to pull to go down further, because you're going to plateau in about 2030. So I think for other businesses, a lot of these things are free, like getting maintenance done on the power factor unit, looking at just steam traps, especially industrial, looking at boiler tuning, boiler efficiency. A lot of the stuff is free or very minimal expenses, R&M or CapEx, lagging. And then you get to the big ticket items and start ticking them off one at a time. But have a very diversified approach and keep your mind open to all the possibilities that are out there. There's no silver bullet, as I said.
Yeah, no, excellent. I have one final question for you, but just before I do, just a shout out to everyone online. There is a Q&A button at the bottom that if you've got any questions that you want us to ask, feel free to post it in the chat. My final question actually is, in terms of your energy purchasing, do you purchase that through a retailer?
So yes, we purchase energy directly through a retailer. We've got really good relationships with the brokering firm, and we lock in pricing long term. So we're locked in for gas and electricity till 2029, and some of our states are locked until 2030. Just because for energy security and just making sure that we've got those contracts in place.
So what this tells me is retailers need to start getting involved in this market. There is a large demand base out there of not just those large industrial customers, but other commercial businesses that will want to purchase renewable gas. And so retailers need to get involved and offer that product.
Definitely, and that's the costing will always be so. When we were planning on getting that burner upgrade, right? So that burner upgrade was costing 100,000 extra, and the discussion was, so you're talking about this burner being ready for multi-fuel, but that multi-fuel cost three, four times, if not five times what natural gas is costing. So where are the economics in that? I said, well, that's from a 2025 lens when we were doing the capex. How do we know that's going to be the case in 10, 20 years? This asset we're buying for 25 years, we've just got to de-risk it and future plan. And that's what got it across the line. So we spent the 100,000 extra. It's still going to run on natural gas in the short term, but it's ready to run on multi-fuel if that time comes. Probably not our decision. That will be then the macro policies of getting the cost effectiveness of those solutions into the grid and being able to purchase it at better rates.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for other businesses to take away is really looking at that long term and it's investing for the long term, not just the short term.
No, definitely.
Okay, well, thank you so much for those insights. I am going to bring Jared on now, and I think you'll duck off for 2 seconds, and then we'll bring you back together in about 10 minutes. But what we've really heard from Harris and his experiences at Alsco is that electrification is not a viable option for all parts of businesses, where they can electrify some parts, others either the technology is not viable or affordable for the end use that they need it, the additional cost of electrical upgrades, or the fact that just their current assets aren't at the end of useful life. So having another alternative for them is really important. So now we bring on Jared, who is going to help us understand the supply potential to help these businesses. So Jared Irving is the General Manager of Renewable Gas and Fuels at LMS. Welcome, Jared.
Thanks, Susie. Appreciate it. And I might just introduce quickly for those who don't know who LMS is. So within LMS, I work as the General Manager of Renewable Gas and Fuels, and my role is focused on scaling renewable gas, in particular biomethane, across Australia and the US and New Zealand. And LMS operates a large portfolio of bioenergy assets. So we have over 70 assets around Australia, New Zealand, and the US. And what we're looking at as part of that is how do we evolve from the current use of that existing biogas resource to our future potential opportunity, which we see in renewable natural gas. My role sits at the intersection of project development, working through offtakes and industrial partners, as well as supporting the policy and market settings that's going to help promote renewable natural gas within Australia. I have a really strong focus in advocacy, and it's clear that it's had a substantial impact internationally in terms of supporting the decarbonisation for industrial consumers around the world, across Europe and the US, and now we're seeing that across Asia as well. So just little bit on our end, but it's exciting to be here with you, Susie, and great to hear from Harris on his perspective.
Yeah, so you're obviously, as you just mentioned, just seeing this you're seeing biomethane play a really strong role overseas. Are you hearing similar stories to what we just heard from Harris? Are you hearing similar stories in the local market about the difficulty of electrifying everything and the need for a green molecule solution?
It's definitely part of the conversation that becomes challenging. Energy, and I really I'll refer back to Harris's point around there's no silver bullet. It is really challenging. We have a variety of constraints when we're talking to some potential industrial customers around whether they're using the methane or the CH4 product as a feedstock, a chemical feedstock as part of their processing facility, or they require these high heat processes that electrification doesn't work for at this point in time. So starting to see that as you're kind of getting above that 150 to 200 degree mark up to that 1,000 degrees and above, it becomes really challenging to kind of diversify away from that. The other challenges that we're seeing in our discussions is that as the world decarbonizes, the ability to be able to support the electrification of certain consumers is becoming challenging because you are decarbonizing with every other industry around the world. And to be able to access the electricity supply, the transformers, the equipment that's required to upgrade, it takes both time and is becoming quite expensive. So there are a large range of challenges that we're hearing from these industries. A lot of them will electrify what they can, and there is always going to be, for a lot of these businesses, a component that they cannot move away from.
So can you tell us why biomethane is such a great solution for them?
Yeah, I mean, I advocate heavily for biomethane, but I see the simplicity in it from a drop-in fuel perspective. So it is chemically equivalent from natural gas. It means that we're taking away a decision from a business that is a capex, so what they need to invest in terms of their products to help continue manufacturing, to a procurement decision where you're making a decision about what energy source you're getting through a retailer. So we're able to provide a product that doesn't require a substantial amount of investment. And I think what gets missed sometimes in this conversation is these businesses have been deployed for quite some time. They've built up the supply source, and they've spent all this money on all of this equipment that, as Harris mentioned, some of them can last for decades. So you really want to make the most of those products over time. And by us being able to provide a drop-in fuel replacement, it's an alternative, a decarbonised alternative that we're able to provide today.
So we are seeing momentum then that can start to bring this product to market. We've seen that DeLorean are in construction of a project in South Australia at the moment. Calfresh has announced a new project in Queensland. Just last week they announced it. Optimal Renewable Gas have announced government funding for a project just last week. You've mentioned you've got a number of projects as well. What other signs are you seeing on the ground that production capability and capacity is starting to scale?
I think the announcements are fantastic, and I tip my hat out to the community at the moment in the bioenergy sector, in the hard work that's gone into a lot of those projects. They are years and years in the making, and a lot of work goes behind the scenes to get to where those projects are. So congratulations to the DeLorean, Calfresh, and also the Optimal Group in terms of where they've gotten to. It's really exciting to see. But we are seeing a shift. We are seeing movement from a policy perspective that is kind of starting to shift towards setting the market signals, critical investment signals that allow us developers to be able to progress and start taking these projects forward. And that's in particular coming out of the New South Wales government. So we're seeing really, really strong policy out of New South Wales government. The Queensland government as well has been driving their biofuels, and it's these kind of decisions are going to help support that production capacity scaling. And from our business in particular, we strongly advocate for that continued support. And I think what's going to drive that, like it has with renewable electricity, is biomethane doesn't have a scaled industry at the moment. It needs that initial support from government to be able to provide a leg up. We haven't had any within this industry for quite some time. And similar to the way the renewable energy target promoted the development of solar and wind, we've seen the dramatic change and shift in the renewable electricity sector. This can have the same opportunity. And I think that's what we're missing, in a sense that there is going to need to be a starting point for this sector. And I think that is coming. And we're starting to see that shift across, both Queensland, New South Wales, and as well as Victoria. So I think that's really going to help support the production as well as the interest from consumers. So having consumers starting to talk to their retailers, starting to say, hey, I'm actually interested in a decarbonised product, a gas product, I think is going to start to really move the dial, and getting interest from those retailers is going to be really important. And industrial consumers that can move in when they can move, and start talking to those developers and asking, hey, can I help support underwriting supply? Can I offtake? Can I buy these contracts? I think it's really important.
So that's really good. Are you sort of saying that's what's really going to help you get your projects over the line as well, getting that offtake and getting that customer demand?
Yeah, yes. And I think it's important to highlight that the technology is here today. Like, these projects have been developed internationally the past 2 decades. landfill gas, which is one area of our focus to RNG, has been developed. There are hundreds of sites in the US currently producing RNG off the back of landfill gas. So the technology is there. The portion of that we're really challenged with is offtake, and it's finding the offtake that can underwrite a project for a length of time that gives comfort to investors, and that's quite challenging. We don't do long-term contracts in Australia, or very long-term contracts. And as Harris mentioned, I think he's talking in the realms of around 4 years. In terms of investment, it's quite challenging to get an investment in a project up over 4 years. We are looking at around 10 years, which is really hard for industrial consumers to be able to commit to that level of gas usage, and also the price for that period of time. So it's certainly a balance, and I think the policy support is really going to help assist kind of that segment, which they currently do, which you would have seen with the capacity investment scheme, where the government is supporting the continuation of the development of wind and solar across the sector through the capacity investment scheme.
So what are the main challenges you face as a developer in getting these to market? We're starting to see the policy landscape shift. We're starting to see the awareness around consumers that this is a viable option for them. You've mentioned that sort of long-term contracting is one challenge. Are there any other challenges that you're facing as a developer?
We're progressing a number of projects, and we're starting to see some of those challenges of it come through now. There are certain obligations in the market and certain requirements for us to inject biomethane into the network that are a lot more challenging than we initially thought. It is challenging when retailers don't want biomethane in the network. They are allowed an option as part of certain gas obligations to be able to say no, so they can potentially push back, which is, for us, a lot of these items are quite challenging, and for first movers in particular across the sector, we're hearing various levels of support, and also the understanding and misunderstanding of biomethane. So a lot of the people that we're working with in other businesses, it's more of an informative role because they actually don't understand. So the easiest solution is just to say no, but it's understanding the implication of these projects. There's challenges from a development perspective and being able to get approvals and planning approvals, but it's definitely an exciting time in the industry. And I think there is an evolution that as we start to see more promotion from government, like New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, we will see the information space kind of starting to fill up and people starting to be a lot more informed than they currently are on biomethane in particular.
Okay, so it sounds like we are at the start of a market. The supply potential is there. Things are starting to move in the right direction, but there's a little bit more work that we still need to do, particularly around that retailer awareness and encouraging them to maybe go for that long-term offtake to provide the product to consumers.
On that supply potential, I think it's important to note, Susie, that from LMS's perspective, we manage currently over 15 petajoules of biogas across our portfolio. So it's quite a substantial amount.
So if you've already got the biogas, what's it currently being used for?
So we both flare and produce electricity. So
you're wasting it.
And it's really interesting because if you look at the policy, you can generate the large generator certificates, or LGCs, and the policy framework pushes to that kind of the current existing use. So that is electricity, and we see the benefit for the gas molecule, and we think that it's going to play an important role in the decarbonisation. LMS as a business is really about trying to decarbonise both the electricity and now, hopefully in the future, the gas sector also.
So really, it's about that policy shift that means that a biomethane molecule is just as valuable to decarbonise the economy as an electron, and that flaring gets stopped, and that flaring is used to actually decarbonise businesses.
Those investments are critical because it allows our business to progress. And if the policy doesn't exist and the frameworks don't exist, it's very challenging to be able to go to investors and say, hey, there is a market for the next 20 years for this large scale investment that you're going to deploy. So understanding from that investability perspective, it's quite challenging if there isn't that supporting policy framework, because there is a lot of confusion about, well, where is the gas industry in the next decade, and is it going to be here? And as we've heard from Harris, it is going to be there.
Yeah.
It's just kind of getting that information out there, because investors
Yeah.
are only hearing what they're hearing.
Yeah, and I think, last year was such a game changer from that policy point of view, getting that NGA's recognition of the emission reduction in that emissions calculation methodology, and having renewable gas certificates that give it a green premium. I think those are some of the major policy shifts which now provide a valuable outcome from biomethane for businesses such as yours. Look, we've heard that the demand is there. The supply potential is available. How about we bring Harris back into the conversation and we talk about how we can make this market happen? So, Sean, can we bring Harris back in? Welcome back, Harris.
Thank you.
Hopefully, in listening to that conversation, that helps give you a level of comfort that biomethane is on its way.
Yeah, it definitely demonstrates that there's something going on in the market, and just getting it to us as an end user, that's the next steps. How do we roadmap that?
So what do you need from a producer to be willing to purchase the biomethane? What do you need from Jared?
I think in the first instance, it's quite similar to what we did with our biomass strategy in the South Island, was telling us that there's enough supply. So when we signed up for some government funding and when we went for the transition away from coal, we actually had a roadmap of the 5 to 10 year forestry numbers and biomass supply that gave us confidence as a business that, and we were able to get some contractual agreements and long-term contracts to demonstrate that supply was there. And secondly, the pricing. I think it was very, very attractive in terms of in New Zealand. And sorry I talk about New Zealand, but it's a similar example that we had with a fuel transition. And what happened there was that the coal attracted an emission trading scheme like carbon tax. So if you took the fuel price and the carbon tax, was quite similar to the pricing that we were getting for biomass, because that was not attracting this carbon tax. So the pricing was comparable for us. It was still about 20 to 30% more, but we thought if we go now, this is the best time to go with some government incentives. The pricing has to be, it needs to be comparable to natural gas for it to make business sense for us.
Okay. Jared, what can you do to help provide Harris with that confidence around supply, and also what will help with the pricing?
I think there's a lot of work that's been done in the supply, and from our perspective, we see a really good opportunity. I mean, you've heard the scale that LMS is at, which is quite substantial. 15 petajoules is a huge amount of biogas. And that's before we start entering the agricultural sector, which has a breadth of opportunities. You also have the wastewater sector and organics. So there is a piece of work that has already been done last year. And thanks, Susie, for working through that with Blunamy in terms of the potential scaling opportunity. And I think really bringing that narrative out is going to be important in terms of the volumes. And I know New South Wales government is working on that. And I believe the Victorian government is also working on understanding what is that bioenergy potential. So there's a lot of work that's kind of going into that to understand, because you're right, Harris, committing to this is we need to be able to commit and understand that there is a pathway to be able to displace potentially 100% of the existing natural gas usage. And I think that's really important, because if there isn't a long-term RNG supply, it's going to be a concern for these consumers that are going to have to think about, well, how do I electrify? What does that look like if there isn't going to be a molecule around in the future?
What about pricing? What's going to help bring down the price that you need to charge customers? And I am going to point to New South Wales and their wonderful announcements like last year.
Yeah. And I think we should understand that cost being borne by certain industrial customers sounds like a great idea, but they can't take, and I've heard from many industrials that have made it quite clear who produce products that, unfortunately, if you can produce a green product that somebody will pay for, if you're producing a consumer-based product, what they're finding is consumers actually just won't pay the premium. So the problem they have is well, how else are we going to decarbonise, and are we going to be left footing the bill? And from my perspective, and the way we have decarbonised other areas and sectors of the economy, we have had a supportive policy framework that has left not the cost on singular users, it's kind of been spread. So I think there's ways of different policy mechanisms that we can look at to be able to help, including New South Wales, where you're looking at the compliance mechanism that they're looking at utilising. There's various methods that we can use to support decarbonisation and kind of being able to sprinkle that cost a little bit as we're scaling an industry. And that second piece of scaling an industry is going to start to see those costs reduce as we start to get smarter in deploying these projects and getting more efficient. That is where those costs will start to come down, similar to what you saw with the solar and wind sector.
Whilst we're on pricing, I'm just turning to the Q&A that sort of started coming through the chat. I'm just going to read out a couple. This one might be for you, Jared. Is there a forecast for the price of biomethane in Australia, like there is for fossil methane and LPG? So what should businesses base their business case on?
There's been some prices put forward previously in some Bloomberg reports, and there's been some prices put forward within AEMO's gas statement of opportunities that can be reviewed, and also some of the work that went into the gas statement of opportunities. There are some links to some external work that AEMO got done that can be that others can go and have a look at. What we're seeing in the market is, from our perspective, it's highly variable depending on the site, depending on the size, and also depending on the scale. So it is highly variable, and you can have a wide range. And I believe there are some numbers out there, but at the moment, given the market is so small, it is going to be quite challenging to get the value. But you can see anywhere between, say, mid $20 a gigajoule, all the way up to mid $30s a gigajoule. Which is comparatively to obviously the market cap or the natural gas cap sitting at $12 a gigajoule. So we're hoping to see those prices come down, and those prices can come down through offtakes of other means. So carbon dioxide we've seen as a supporting mechanism to help reduce the price, and also the sale of digestate and taking gate fees. Those sorts of products and inputs into a project can help support the reduction in that biomethane price.
And also, would you say that schemes like the New South Wales Renewable Fuel Scheme, which also provides input to projects, that is another lever that will help reduce the price that you need to charge the market?
Exactly. And I guess the other lever that it gives is, if you're looking at a long-term project, it is a 10-year scheme. It provides confidence over a 10-year time frame, pending the outcomes of the rules. But that allows us to make an investment decision off the basis of understanding what is the compliance cost, what is it going to be longer term, and over that 10-year period. So if we're rolling out in 5 years' time off a contract, we know that natural gas prices potentially aren't going to be $6 a gigajoule or less, and we have enough protection through the compliance mechanism to make sure that the project isn't underwater at that point in time.
So really, I guess if we go back to the original question of, what do they put in their business case? They could be looking really at the long-term price forecast of natural gas plus a green premium in terms of that price. And then they're comparing it to what's the cost to their business if they do nothing or do an alternative decarbonisation pathway. And that's really the basis of their business case, is making those comparisons.
Something that they can use to back calculate the dollar cost of that green premium, and then other business will have safeguard compliance obligations that may be creeping in as that they get further and further constrained by the requirements. And what we are seeing is that will hopefully translate into a greater green certificate price through the Renewable Gas Guarantee of Origins or Product Guarantee of Origins.
Yep. Okay, thank you. A question on Victoria, for Victorian policy. What policies would help biomethane scale quickly in Victoria? Is there sort of one main policy that they should go for?
For me, Susie, or Harris?
Yeah, sorry, Jared. No, Jared.
Oh, sorry.
As a
Apologies.
as a producer, people want to know, we've seen the progress of policy in New South Wales. What is it that would help with Victoria?
They're already planning their current policy, and I think if they hopefully keep progressing that, that would be fantastic. And similar mechanism to New South Wales, I think would be quite effective. So I think they just need to continue to push that and drive that forward. Would be really effective to starting the industry, and that's both the capex and operational support through the compliance scheme that New South Wales has.
Okay, Harris, here's one for you. Was the extra $100,000 for the multi-fuel boiler capability for one boiler or the total cost for multiple boilers?
That was for one burner on one boiler package. So
Wow.
for comparison, the entire boiler package with the normal Riello burner was about 700, and we added 100 on top to get a multi-fuel burner ready.
Wow,
So
great.
15% extra.
Thank you. Both, I guess, Jared and Harris, I'm not sure if either of you have an opinion on this one. What do you see as the biggest risk for Australian businesses in this emerging market?
I could target that a little bit. Looking at de-risking for Elscott, I feel like the biggest risk in this market is not being exposed to enough opportunities and options to take the decarb pathway or lower emissions pathway. Just because with such a volatile energy market, you don't want to have full exposure to one fuel source. And therefore, having these multiple and being diversified across actually makes sense in this day and age. That's our strategy. But yeah, it'll look different for other people, but that's just something that we're focusing on.
Okay. Is there a risk to this? And this one's for you, Jared. Is there a risk to this market actually emerging? And so that option gets taken away from businesses. I think some of the questions that are coming through the chat go to, is there competition for the feedstock? I know the Bloomberg report talks to that a bit, but could the biogas be used for, will it come from electrification? Will there be a switch where that biogas gets used for biomethane? And will further biogas that's unlocked be used for alternative biofuels?
I think there's definitely a risk, Susie, and it's highly dependent on where the policy points the direction to. So understanding that there is a potential for feedstock competition, but we need to realise that biomethane is probably a lot more of a low-hanging fruit in the short term, which will allow longer term looking at future sustainable aviation fuel, obviously, or low carbon liquid fuels. If you are producing a biomethane, you can produce a low carbon liquid fuel. So it's a continuation, and it does open the door to other opportunities. Biomethane isn't going to be the answer for all sites. There are so many different various bioenergy solutions depending on site locations and other challenges, and we completely understand that. And I think there was a comment, or it was one of the questions was around appetite to pay from the aviation industry, and just from experience alone in that industry, there is a very small voluntary market from a sustainable aviation perspective, but in saying that, it is very limited, and the interest that we're getting is mainly from the mandatory based mechanisms like Singapore and other international parties. So a lot of the appetite to pay is actually coming from mandatory sectors rather than voluntary, and we don't really think that the appetite is there yet to be able to get projects over the line.
Okay. So interesting that you raise those other countries. How much is there a threat to a local industry here in Australia for biomethane? How much is there a threat from export from those other countries that are trying to decarbonise themselves and they want to buy up our biomethane? This one's for you, Jared.
Yeah, it's definitely I would say it's definitely a credible threat. There is an international decarbonisation occurring today, and you have countries like Singapore and Japan pushing to decarbonise, and they don't have pathways like we do in terms of electrification through wind and solar. They currently use large volumes of natural gas, and decarbonisation of that is going to be quite challenging longer term. So it's definitely an opportunity, but it also needs to be factored into account as we look forward. We need to be able to support industrial decarbonisation within Australia as well, and understanding how can we do that. And that is where the federal government and state governments have a really important role to play, because those international governments are progressing to support their industrial consumers to decarbonise. So I think the federal and state government have certainly have a role to play, but we want to see the market established in Australia, and I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. So what we could potentially see in the near term is, if frameworks aren't established federally and across the various states, I think there'll be challenges being able to get projects over the line, and export may be the only option in that space.
So it sounds like what we need is Australian businesses to speak up more, to provide that voice that we do need it here, and to encourage two things. I guess government to put those policies in place so that we're not at risk of the export, and also retailers, so that retailers are offering that product so that local businesses can buy it. Harris, quick question for you. Do you know of any retailers that are offering biomethane at the moment as a product?
None
What are
that
your
I'm
conversations?
none that I'm aware
Yeah.
of. A lot of
I-
certified renewable electricity being offered, but nobody, again, I get a lot of emails, a lot of calls about that, but nobody's called up or given anything about biomethane. And we work across a lot of retailers in different
You
states.
do.
Yeah.
And there's sort of no indication at the moment that they're heading down that pathway yet?
No, nothing that I've come across. And we go out to tender every few months to lock in future pricing, talk to all the major retailers. Nothing as such.
It feels like, I'm a little conscious of the time, it feels like this is a bit of a call to action then. What we need to do is work with businesses and get them to speak up and engage with their retailers, so that retailers are encouraged to offer that renewable gas product.
Oh, definitely.
At the same time, at the same time, maybe the call to action for businesses is, get out and speak to your retailer, get out and speak to your local councils as well, and help them recognise there's probably some local waste that could be used to produce this, and write to your local MP and encourage them, if you're not in New South Wales, encourage your local MP to replicate New South Wales policy. I think this is the way to go. Any last minute questions coming through the chat at all before I hand back to Sean to close out? Don't see anything coming through the chat that I've got coming to me. So Sean, I'm going to hand back to you to.
I think there was one question, Susie, on the carbon intensity of landfill versus landfill-based RNG versus wastewater, agriculture, organics.
Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So it's a good question. Highly dependent on the scheme you're looking at. So you've got a wide range of schemes internationally around the world. So you've got the RED 3 based ISCC EU, you have ISCC plus type certification schemes. Those are all going to have very slight variations. And then there's also US based schemes that you can utilize in terms of the CI. And then you also now have product guarantee of origin. So pending the scheme that you investigate and you look at, those are all going to have varying carbon intensities. Now, it's highly dependent on who the offtake might be. It will determine the criticality on that carbon intensity, but at the moment we aren't seeing the value shift depending on that kind of carbon intensity of the product. For us, from a landfill gas perspective, we aim to have quite a low carbon intensity for our product, and that's utilising various methods during project development to keep them as low as possible. And then in terms of wastewater, agriculture and organics, it's highly varied on the feedstock. So really, really challenging to understand kind of those CI scores, but there's a lot of work to be done with product guarantee of origins and other schemes in Australia to work through that. But
we already have the green power.
Summary. And yes, we have green power as well. Yeah. Which has a different carbon intensity scoring scheme, which is based on an LCA.
LCA standing for?
life
Just for
cycle
everyone's benefit.
analysis.
There we go. Thank
Sorry,
you.
apologies. We're the industry of acronyms, so
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you, Harris. Thank you both so much for your time and for this conversation. Hopefully it's been enlightening for everyone online, and I'll hand back to Sean. You're on mute, Sean.
And I'm on mute. Thanks very much, Jared, Harris, and Susie for moderating. I'll do the close now. I might just drop you guys off if that's okay, and then we can close it all out. But that was a very good conversation, and I think the calls to action were clear. I think that it's fair to say that we have the resource, we have the technology, and there's a demand for renewable gas to decarbonise hard to electrify businesses. So if there is the need, what are the actions that we can take to build momentum for renewable biomethane? We've heard the challenges, but what are the key calls to action? So I'm just going to run through what I heard in this session is that for commercial and industrial customers, demand action on renewable fuels that can keep your business viable and productive while decarbonising at the same time. So tell your retailers you want renewable gas. Tell government you want renewable gas and you would like it now. The energy retailers, important to make offers of renewable gas as it becomes available. So work with customers because you're helping them to decarbonise. So that will be the call to action for you, policymakers, state and federal. There's a lot of good work to recognise and support the production of renewable biomethane and other bioenergy. Let's formalise the targets here across the nation. And we've seen the New South Wales renewable fuel schemes getting in first, but I know that there's a lot of other work happening in Victoria as well. So targets and support for renewable gas, much like solar and wind, over the long term are going to create the industry just like it did for those types of renewable energy. And biomethane is renewable. So that's very important to know. And the other one was local government. These resources we currently call waste could be inputs to biomethane producing and other renewable fuels and gases production processes. And so biomethane can unlock the value of the community's waste is the message. So let's raise that. So they're some of the key stakeholders. Obviously, project developers need the help that will come from this to get projects done. So that's the really key message. And so what's happening for the next episode? Well, the next episode, episode 3, will wrap the series and we'll have a look at what success could look like for Australia, for Victoria and Australia. And so stay tuned for that announcement. So we're really setting a path forward, a more detailed path forward based on what we've heard today. And so I must also have a sponsor thank you here and really appreciative of Gemina and LMS Energy, who are foundation and gold members of the VBN respectively, for helping to sponsor or actually sponsoring this series and making it possible. And so thank you from the team and from the broader bioenergy community for this event. And so what I'll do now is I'll just share the feedback link and we'll talk you through the last few things before we wrap up. And as I find my sharing tool on my screen, and here we go, it's here. It's just slightly hidden. So on the screen, you will see a QR code to a Slido poll, and that will allow you to give us some feedback on this webinar and also any suggestions you have for future webinars. That would be fantastic. And so you have that link to have a look at. And then I'd also like to finally sort of let you know that any recording will be available next week. So that's once we do the requisite cleaning up and correct translations of the transcriptions. But if you have any further questions, please contact info@bigBioenergy.com.au. And finally, and most importantly, thank you for taking the time to engage and join us on the mission of building the renewable gas industry and the renewable bioenergy industry more broadly. You can get involved by signing up for our newsletter, attending our very popular in-person events. The next one is in Geelong in June, and consider joining the VBN so we can accelerate the renewable biomethane and bioenergy sector as a whole. And you can use that same email to get in touch with us. I bid you a good afternoon and see you for episode 3. Thank you very much.